Amber Smith is here, an Army helicopter pilot, former senior Pentagon official. Amber, good to have you with us. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Vince.
We're talking a lot about how this could possibly happen. And one of the things that I keep hearing from helicopter pilots like yourself, Amber, is they can see how it could happen, given the way that this plane was approaching and what is typical for that area. Give us your sense. What are the basics here?
Yeah, so I agree with what you have heard from other pilots. I think that when the helicopter crew got the call from Tower to confirm that they had visual confirmation of the aircraft that they were told to avoid, and then they confirmed to Tower that they had eyes on that aircraft, I think that they had eyes on the wrong aircraft and confirmed that they had visual sight of it, thinking it was the right aircraft, and likely never even saw the aircraft that they ended up flying into. And most people are like, how can that happen? They're under night vision goggles, and the sky is lit up, and the commercial airliner has all these lights on it. How could a helicopter not see the plane? And I think the biggest thing here to remember is that there is a lot going on as a helicopter pilot, especially when you're flying in the National Capital Region, which is one of the biggest highly dense aerial traffic areas when it comes to helicopters and these commercial jets sort of operating in the same area.
Yes.
And so it was likely, like, you could miss it. If the aircraft is from above you and it is descending on short final, which it was, if they were not looking directly up above them, which you also, have the rotor systems up above you, they were not thinking there was an aircraft there. So sadly, if they were looking right, the other pilot was looking left. And remember, under night vision goggles, it's like looking out of a straw. So you have a very narrow field of view, like horse blinders are on you.
Yes.
And while they allow you to operate at night, it is still extremely challenging to fly under night vision goggles.
So, so many in our audience, of course, have flown in and out of Reagan National Airport many times. One of the ways you do fly in is along the Potomac River, coming from the Wilson Bridge and then landing right there on, I believe, runway 1. And you come in and you've got, if you're a helicopter in that situation, you're looking down the river. There's not a lot of visual obstruction. There's a night sky. Yes, there's light on both pieces of the shore. But this plane wasn't coming from there. In fact, it had changed because had been told to by the air traffic control tower to come instead from a different direction, coming over land, more from National Harbor area, and flying into runway 33. How much does all of that light on land affect your ability to see anything with those night vision goggles?
Well, it definitely affects it, but not it. The issue here is that there's multiple aerial lights, and so it is very easily, when you do not have much direction, which I've listened to the audio, and to me, it sounds like ATC is just asking him, hey, do you see the traffic? There's no direction. There's no location. He may have said, like, the landing aircraft, but still there's zero confirmation that they're talking about the same aircraft.
Right.
And so I think there's like a serious breakdown in communication. And I know this will all come out in investigations, but it's like, I want to see how long had that ATC air traffic controller, been on shift. And we're hearing all of these reports about how understaffed they are and how they're having to work these long shifts. And but the sad thing in aviation is that there is very little room for error, and communication is absolutely essential for the safety and to mitigate risk in sort of these high risk operations, which is aviation. And so go ahead, sorry.
Sure. No. My next question is, how much information is at the hands of these helicopter pilots inside of the cockpit? In other words, are they able to see what the air traffic around them looks like? Is there a panel that's indicating what planes are nearby or inbound? Or do they have to rely entirely on the air traffic control tower for this?
So the Black Hawk that this is flying, they have like they have a national mission up in the National Capital Region. They're based out of Fort Belvoir, just south of DC. And so it depends on what software they had in this aircraft, which is different than the type of technology that you may have on a combat mission in Iraq or Afghanistan. And so I do not know exactly the type of what they had going on in the cockpit, but it is not some sort of, just for a visual for people who are not familiar with aviation. It is not like what you see in Top Gun, where you have your aircraft on the screen and then there's bleeps of other aircraft around you. That's not what it looks like at all. Mm-hmm. If anything, they do have basically anti-collision avoidance alarms, but often with helicopters, they are not effective because of how low helicopters fly. And so they constantly have physical hazards around them. And if you are constantly having an alarm going off,
yes.
It just makes it that much more distracting and can actually be a distraction and a safety hazard. So those types of avoidance actually works better when you're straight and level flight at a specific altitude, not when you are flying low level, which they were extremely low level, with all types of hazards around you.
Okay, one of the elements here is the altitude, and I'm curious about that because my understanding is that these helicopters are supposed to be flying no higher than 200 feet along, in this case, the eastern shore of the Potomac as they fly south. And one would assume that the airplanes that are flying into Reagan National would be coming in at the very lowest, just above them. What do you think happened there? How do those two flight paths end up meeting?
Yeah. So first of all, I want to say that 200-foot ceiling is insane to me. I just found that out, and just to give some context for that, when I was in Afghanistan flying under night vision goggles, my hard deck, meaning I could not fly below, was 300 feet. Why was it 300 feet? Because our command did not want us smacking our helicopters or flying directly into a mountain or the ground or whatever hazards are extremely low level. So when I heard that, first of all, that's the policy, that aerial helicopter route is 200 feet ceiling. I mean, they got to look at that because the traffic that has been increased, I'm assuming that's a very old number, flight altitude that has not changed, and they obviously do it for deconfliction purposes, but it is very high risk for those helicopters. I can't believe there hasn't been a bigger incident just with helicopters because of that. When it comes to the crash last night, the airliner was on descent on short final, so it was rapidly losing altitude to try to land. The helicopter, I think, was at, like you said, they are supposed to be at 200 feet. It had bounced up to 350, something like that, when they made contact, when the helicopter crashed into the plane. That can happen with the most minor wind gust, the most minor tap of the cyclic, or the collective, the controls inside the helicopter. A couple 150 jump in altitude in a helicopter is like, it happens to everyone. It's just not, it is nothing. It can happen in the blink of an eye that you jump up altitude that quickly.
So a weather factor may have played a role. I mean, my understanding is that wind was, I could be wrong, but that wind played a role in the decision to even switch the landing last night to runway 33. So presumably wind could have been a factor here.
It absolutely could have, but the issue is that everybody in the aviation world should know this. So why is there such a minimum separation allowed between a aircraft on short final coming down and military helicopters flying below it? And I also think a big problem here, because the ATC is trying to be efficient, which is with as much aerial traffic as they have and how many moving parts and pieces they have to do to make everything, the sequencing work, everybody has become too used to clearing helicopters to fly under or behind these civilian commercial airliners that are on short final. That is so dangerous. That is a risk that does not need to be taken, just as we saw last night.
Yes.
Any of these circumstances can happen, and like that has got to stop.
My impression is one of the reasons that occurs in this area is because the helicopter traffic, unlike, say, New York, is not commercial. Everything here is military or police officers, like basically official government aircraft, really the only ones allowed to be in this area doing that. And they have a rapport with these air traffic controllers. And that kind of gets to the point I think that you're making, Amber Smith, which is it's gotten so lax that something this horrific could occur last night.
Yes, it is. It has gotten way too loose. It has gotten way too common that they're allowed to do that. Because guess what? When everything's fine, it works great, and you get to your destination 30 seconds sooner than you would have.
Yeah.
But guess what? When not everything is lined up perfectly,
yes,
look at what happened.
Amber Smith, they're telling us there was a crew of 3 on that Black Hawk last night, and I'm interested if you could help us understand kind of the roles of the people who were on that helicopter. But one thing I've heard is that when the weather is better and not quite as cold, the doors on the aircraft can be open, and that can help with visibility to kind of get an assessment around you of what's happening. But that last night was so cold that the doors would have been closed, and that would have constricted visibility to an extent. Can you talk about that at all?
Yeah, so you have 2 pilots. One's the pilot in command, one's the co-pilot. You have a crew chief. As I heard, there was only one on board tonight. Sometimes they have 2, depending upon the mission. But the crew chief's job is also to, clear the aircraft in the back, also look for traffic, among many, many other things. I will say that flying with doors on versus flying without doors on is a problem visually, not necessarily out the windscreen, but when it comes to a helicopter, you have this sort of like panoramic view, and you need all of it. And then and that's the view you have with the doors off. When you put the doors on, they're that dark green. Well, these helicopters were different, but you just have a little window, and it does obscure your vision a little bit. I remember flying my own aircraft. When you have the doors off, you can just see so much better. You can fly better. When you put the doors on, you're a little bit more restricted. But I honestly think these pilots were used to flying with doors on because they had, I think they at least sometimes did this VIP mission. And so I would think that they were very accustomed to flying with doors on. I don't know that for sure, but that's just my assessment from, knowing the field. So yeah, it obscures your vision a little bit. But I don't know. I bet they were probably used to it.
Yeah, probably so. Amber Smith, I'm really appreciative of your expertise and your time today. Thank you for that. Army helicopter pilot, former senior Pentagon official. Really appreciate you joining us here.